10 Things Tom Cruise Doesn't Want Us to Know. 10. Tom had some pretty weird rules for Katie Holmes. The Pope, rather understandably, has to travel in his own customized vehicle with bulletproof glass. Religious violence is a real thing, in the real world. While Tom Cruise no doubt needs some degree of security when traveling, he seems to think he's a target for some kind of Jason Bourne-esque assassin, lurking around any corner. Does Tom Cruise need a bulletproof car? Probably not, although he seems to regularly bump into people who he thinks oppose his right to practice his faith openly. Yes, Tom, clearly the hordes of adoring fans, the army of personal slaves, and the general public's disinterest in your religion in the first place mean you're a prime target for some kind of celebrity hit squad. If anything, Tom's the one traveling with his own private army. Plus, if Tom's been hiding his faith, I shudder to think what he's doing when we're not looking. 11. Tom almost sent his daughter to the Scientology gulag. As we've already seen, Scientology's unofficial designation for new recruits and underlings on the totem pole is the Sea Org, which mostly involves swabbing the poop deck of the massive free-wind ship and working until you almost literally drop dead of exhaustion. Well, apparently, Tom thought the Sea Org was good enough for his daughter Suri, and Katie Holmes did not agree. She probably had something more along the lines of the Girl Scouts for rich kids in mind, whatever that's called. Tossing her daughter in the watery gulag was not on Katie's game plan, and Tom's insistence on the issue was a major factor in their divorce. And hey, kudos to Katie. It can't be easy to leave a cult that regularly shames and defames all defectors, even Dave Miscavige's father. The idea of signing their kid up to a billion-year allegiance contract, yes, that's a thing, on a floating death trap where malnutrition is enormous, certainly where most parents would draw the line. Most sane parents, anyway. 10. Tom had some pretty weird rules for Katie Holmes. If you're going to audition to be Cruise's new forever co-star, you first have to answer a barrage of questions from the church about your drug, criminal, and sexual history, among other things. The more chaste the potential wife is, the better. Katie Holmes not only passed these weird tests, but even agreed to the odd rules Tom sets out for his wives when it comes to conduct out of the home, or carrying out her wifely duties. It got weird. Tom, who is an actor, not a doctor, even bought an ultrasound machine for his house so he could monitor Katie's pregnancy. Even weirder was his insistence that Katie stay silent during childbirth, as Scientologists believe that scary noises and bad words can mess up a newborn's brain. But locking young children in a starvation boat is totally acceptable. Katie even got an extra $3.8 million in the divorce proceedings for agreeing not to mention the marriage or publicly announce new boyfriends for a period of 5 years. 9. Divorcing Tom Cruise is the real mission. Impossible. Scientology isn't just something its adherents can walk away from when they become disillusioned with the degree of control it exerts over their life. Ronald Miscavige left the church in 2012, although escaped would be a more apt word after he realized his son was a tyrant who was running the church like his own personal gang. Ronald had to save the pittance he earned as part of the Sea Org for years and weave a web of lies to finally break out of Scientology's grip. Similarly, Katie Holmes wanted to bail after she refused to let Tom turn Suri, or herself, into another Xenu-worshipping zombie, but this was easier said than done. Katie had to spin her own web of deception that would have made Ethan Hunt proud. To ditch her constant surveillance and church handlers, Holmes had to enlist the help of her friends in obtaining several untraceable phone lines, renting an apartment in New York away from Tom, and having her father fire all of the Scientology-vetted assistants she'd been gifted by Tom. Scary stuff. 8. Tom could make it all stop if he wanted to. Let's be very clear on one thing. Scientology's public image is Tom Cruise's face. Tom Cruise in action movies, Tom Cruise in comedies, Tom Cruise jumping up and down on Oprah's couch. It's all 100% Tom. If Tom woke up tomorrow and decided that Scientology was all a bunch of nonsense, it would wilt and die almost overnight. But that's very unlikely to happen. Part of the reason Scientology ropes in so many celebrities is their skill at blackmailing people to get their cooperation and complicity. Through long, tedious auditing sessions, Scientologists go deep on the important events that they believe shaped their lives, and their deeply held opinions, all of which is discreetly recorded. Tom is also unlikely to give up the personal servants, the lavish lifestyle, and the constant showering of gifts and wife auditions that his status in the church grants him. If he woke up tomorrow and publicly trashed Scientology, it would all vanish. Although really, all that means is Tom could go from godlike celebrity to merely a super rich one. 7. Tom keeps a tight rein on his media coverage. When it comes to how he's portrayed in the media, Tom likes to treat media coverage of himself like a politician would. That is, to only let out a tightly controlled version of himself for public consumption. A bit megalomaniacal? Yeah, but that's how Tom rolls. Journalists from publications as benign as Good Housekeeping have commented on how tightly Cruise keeps a lid on any journalism that could damage his public persona. He typically has an assistant openly record his interview sessions, which is out of the ordinary, to say the least. Also of note during the Good Housekeeping interview was Tom and Katie greeting each other with a dreamy look, only saying the words "I love you" before she exited the room, and Tom losing his mind dancing to a Kanye West remix of the Mission Impossible theme song. You do you, Tom? 6. He distributes Scientology materials on the sets of his movies. Anyone who sees Tom Cruise talk for more than 30 seconds shouldn't be surprised that he's dead set on evangelizing the virtues of Scientology. On the set of Steven Spielberg's War of the Worlds, Tom asked Tommy Davis, his Scientology handler, to set up a tent for the benefit of the laymen on the cast and crew. Spielberg was sharply criticized for letting a weirdo alien cult advertise for their religion, book club on his set, but Spielberg just responded that all the Scientologists he'd met were such nice people. The church's Paul Haggis responded with, "Yeah, we keep all of the evil ones in the closet." You mean, we've only met the good ones? 5. Tom Cruise and Dave Miscavige are brothers to a creepy extent. David Miscavige should creep you out. The guy who essentially took over Scientology as a whole in 1986. He's largely responsible for turning Scientology into the billion-dollar juggernaut that it is today, a church that relies on intimidation and even literal starvation to keep their members in line. The fact that Tom and Dave are tight brothers won't shock you if you've been reading so far, and the fact that Dave is basically interested in Tom as a well-groomed pet shouldn't shock you either. According to various reports of ex-members of the church, Dave adapted his behavior to Tom's preferences in order to gain favor with the star, smoking cigars with him even though he hated the taste, and indulging in flashy Las Vegas vacations. The two also regularly participate in exercise contests to out-macho each other, ride motorbikes together, and are the only people allowed to use the kennels at Scientology HQ. Never mind that Dave's wife is missing and the worst is assumed, or that Dave's been recording his auditing sessions with Tom this whole time. 4. If you're one of his pals, Tom will probably try to convert you. What's the fun of being the figurehead of a cult-y church if you can't bring your pals along for the ride? Tom Cruise definitely seems as though he'd rather have a few pals around than not, shabby treatment of Leah Remini notwithstanding. In the case of Tom and David Beckham, the two were virtually inseparable for a time. The two likely met through Penelope Cruz, who Tom was dating at the time, and soon Tom was jetting off to watch Beckham's Real Madrid games. The bromance grew so deep that David named one of his kids Cruz, after an alternate spelling of Tom's last name. So how did it get weird? Apparently, Tom has a gift for making things weird, which is sort of inevitable when you're a cult leader. Tom had a bunch of his Sea Org underlings meticulously laser-level a soccer pitch at the Scientology Gold Base in LA, and invite David to come kick the old ball around with him. Beckham declined, probably because a tiny voice in his head told him that he was being groomed for membership into, a cult. 3. Tom and Dave are waiting for L. Ron Hubbard's return. It's kind of ironic that as seriously as Scientology takes itself, it's still basically a hodgepodge of ideas and concepts taken from Christianity, psychology, although, according to them, psychology is evil, and pop culture, science fiction writing. Makes sense then, because Ron Hubbard was a pretty terrible sci-fi writer. Besides being that, as well as the guy to start Scientology, he's also apparently going to return from the dead a la Jesus Christ someday, and Dave Miscavige and Tom Cruise want to be literally right there when it happens. That's why Tom and Dave have villas directly next to each other in LA at the Scientology Gold Base, a mere stone's throw away from the house that Ron will live in. whenever he decides to show up. It's been 30+ years since he died and he was supposed to be back in 21 or so the guy's obviously just chilling on a cloud somewhere. Laziest cult leader ever. 2. No really, Tom Cruise is treated like a god. Or at the very least, like some Willy Wonka child who flies off the handle and screams at anyone around him at the slightest provocation. But really, so many presents have been given to Tom Cruise by Dave Miscavige in Scientology that he's probably barely touched the millions he's made from his movies. Cruise has received, among many other things, a eucalyptus tree that was made into pens, an in-house flight simulator that fills a room, custom detailing on his expensive motorbikes, and perhaps most notably, a field full of wildflowers that was arranged for Tom and then wife Nicole by Dave Miscavige himself, after he heard Tom talking about how he wished he could walk through one with her. Anyone willing to do that for you is certainly expecting something beyond just being brothers forever out of the deal. 1. Tom Cruise versus psychology and medicine. Scientologists really hate the field of psychology. So much so that as their figurehead, Tom, grows visibly upset when asked about his opinions on the matter, such as during an infamous interview with Matt Lauer where he called psychologists antisocial enemies of the people. What reason could Scientology possibly have for hating psychology so much? The simple fact of the matter is that Scientology considers itself the foremost explanation of the intricacies of the human mind, and they hate competition. The process of auditing that the church developed to give false insight into the meaning of thoughts with the aid of fake e-meters is unique to them, and frankly, any reputable psychologist would turn their nose up at any of the church's practices. That hasn't stopped Tom from loudly declaiming psychology at any chance he gets, and that includes prescription drugs for mental illness, a subject over which Tom and Brooke Shields butted heads, as Tom publicly criticized Brooke for taking